Thank you. Yeah, warm welcome from my side as well. And it's great to see so many of you here today. Just like Ed, you said, it's all about sharing and coming together and really harvesting on this futures literacy foresight practices. And this is what the demo hour is about. So just a few words what this format is. This format was born at the beginning of this year with the aim to learn from each other. From each other's practices, because we all have different practices, to share methods, knowledges, approaches, and kind of broaden our perspective, right, about what foresight is. These are monthly sessions, excuse me. So they're happening every month for 1 hour to 1.5. It's always open, it's always free for everyone to join who is interested in foresight in general. And for every session, we have one of our members stepping up on the stage and sharing his or her knowledge with us. And today we're extremely excited to have you, Amos Taylor, with us. You were a member of both networks, and you brought these two networks together to kind of organize this session today. And we're doing it under the umbrella of the demo hours. But yeah, it's really a collaboration. So before I give the word to you, just a quick introduction who you are for the people who don't know you. You are a futurist and project researcher at the Finland Futures Research Centre, and you have developed a futures technique or method, you will tell us more about it, that you call Scalable Fruits. In general, the session and also the interactive part with you in a moment will be very much about utilizing networks and potentially having a more casual workshop format for meaningful conversations. So let's see how that is working for us. And thank you so much for your time, for stepping up today. We have roughly 30 minutes with you now, and then we will have time for discussion. So everybody keep your questions, post them in the chat if you have them, raise your hands, and then I'm sure we'll have a good time. Over to you.
Thank you, Leah. Yes, so exactly this is the idea, to a little bit be reflexive, and I'm being reflexive here and considering kind of the networks we use, the experiences of the foresight work we do, and there's kind of like niggling, maybe not so formal approaches that you think are interesting and you keep using them, but maybe they're not formalized yet, or they're not the official futures and foresight methods. So what are the futures official methods, you know? And this is one of the things with futures and foresight is, if you know the methods, then you are kind of qualified. But this is also a question about what your aim is, you know. So I'm going to share my screen, and if you're wondering, I have my camera kind of low down because I will do some things with some fruit after a while. I share. So I have about. I do a quick colorful round of, let's see, can you see my slides?
Yes.
No. Yes. Very good. Okay. So Scalable Fruit is the name of my and it's kind of stuck. It's a name that's stuck, but it kind of you'll see why. Part of my frustration in workshops and a lot of work in foresight is that you have the kind of same people turning up, and they're almost like automatic in their responses, and they kind of know, like, okay, well, it's going to be about AI, it's going to be about Internet of Things, maybe climate change, and then so there's kind of like the usual suspects, and these post-its, which, you know, we love to write on them. That's really important. Like people have to express themselves, But this is not the only way. And sometimes these are working against us. Sometimes these make a kind of you blind to the experience of workshops. Did you go to a memorable workshop, or was it the same old thing, usual? You know, the 5 people sitting at the table and then say hi and quickly go through the trends, and then those trends are kind of extracted, and the organizers say, "Thank you very much. We got what we wanted. Hopefully you had a nice time." And maybe they did, but maybe they didn't. So, but there's another part of the workshop is that it's about experience. So for a long time now, I was interested in kind of avant-garde, experimentational spaces, these kind of non-formal spaces. Sometimes it can be art gallery as a kind of a learning space, or a street corner where something is tested, and they're more about the experience. Of course, we understand about experiential futures, but when I was doing this work, maybe 15 years ago, starting, I was more interested in kind of the creative practice or creative situations, and also then the idea that, like Joseph Beuys says, everyone is an artist, and it's also been said that maybe everybody could be a futurist. Then Joseph Beuys also thinks, or Alan Kapler also said that everybody already is an artist, and we could also think that everybody can, you know, is already using the future. So these have kind of a overlapping. John Cage was instrumental in teaching this kind of a fluxus, very conceptual works in which you kind of gave scripts or an event score. And I think this is a very important thing to consider when making creative workshops. To think about the kind of the plan and the experience and the potential that they have. And another thing to mention also is about Susan Sontag, the kind of a famous kind of essayist, and at this point she was talking about artworks, and the usual, as I understood it, the usual approach was that when we go to an art gallery and we look at painting, we're trying to think, what was the artist trying to say? And that was the kind of predominantly thing. The good bourgeoisie thing to do is to like look at the art and understand what the artist is saying. But in her approach was, what does it mean to me? And so how do we find our own interpretation, and we make our mark and experience life and art. And the idea is about this is the Fluxus movement, avant-garde movement, these movements, and they were blurring the official world of art and the unofficial world of life and blending them together. So this was my starting space. Alison Knowles, member of the Fluxus group, and she made a memorable work that I really liked. And it was just very simple. It was a performance about making a salad. So I'll go through this. And it was just people making a salad, and it changed, it's like somehow bringing up these kind of human elements. But of course, food is a wonderful element to get people to talk, to open up. And so I was asked to design kind of or join a session to make a workshop kind of for shy people. In the first time, it was with unemployed refugees in the Turku region, and then another one it was with artists and creatives, which I will show you now. And so the idea was to make an event where they would come together. They could explore together their own practice and think what they want to do in the future. So the first people were invited to this event, and people would choose a basket of fruit that would represent them through the time, and they had to. That's going to be your basket, and that's going to represent you for for the whole evening. Next, there was tables laid out, and different questions was written onto the tables with non-permanent marker, I might say. Don't do the mistake of permanent markers. And people were just flowing in and coming and arriving, and they go around and answer these questions with the fruit. So just to place your fruit near to something that is important to you or represents to you. And so there was all kinds of different questions there. What do you dream about? Do you dream about people? Do you dream about pleasure? Do you dream about the future? Do you dream about the past? And so it's kind of an experience, and people were not sure what's happening, and the tables slowly fill up. So we slowly the kind of experience, the room kind of changed, the feeling changed. People were a little bit more testing what this is, and there was some little music in the background. Then we kind of got around all together and in a group explain why you answered like that. So, for example, so you put the tomato there, you know, apple there, you know, next to that question. Why did you put it that you want to? And so the idea was to the tables offer kind of a scale, like a Likert scale, or you know, from one extreme to another. And so very, very simply, and you make your own kind of a calibration about, you know, how close or how far. And people opened up that, well, I answered like this, that I'm usually working in this way, that I would like to work more with other people, but for example, I'm more working alone right now, but I'm not kind of brave enough. And somebody else says that, well, yeah, I'm kind of the same, but not quite there where you are yet. And so it started to open up, and everybody had their own kind of iteration. The difference is that the iteration is not for the organizer necessarily, even though I'm recanting it to you now. It's not recanting, but it's more kind of a between the people, between the members who are there in the space. And in the final part, they were telememory, and I collaborated with 2 performance artists. And they would tell a memory about that specific fruit. Well, so why did you choose the fruit that you had, and what does it mean to you? Can you remember something about that fruit? And people were telling, for example, Ismail Falk was he started it, this kind of, and he had an elaborate story about a memory of lemons, and his grandmother who was peeling lemons. Also, then another performance artist, Tommy Lindman, he also then kind of led the way and opened up. So this was I had already like decided that they would facilitate this part of in other events. I have asked different people. So what this is about kind of often about forgotten futures that might have been. For some people, it was being a refugee and from Afghanistan, and kind of the life that they had and the skills that they had. And now in Finland, that future couldn't continue in the same way. And so what to do. So it was also quite sensitive issues sometimes, but it was somehow very much that you kind of gain a trust there. And nobody was forced to do anything, you know, and open up. There was also some interpreters there as well. In other times is also what you want to, what would you like to learn? What would you like to, what skills would you like to learn? Somebody was talking about that they would really like to. They've always wanted to knit, and really like to start to learn how to knit now. And that's what they're going to plan to do next year. Is going to be about knitting. And somebody else was saying, yeah, I want to do that. I join you with that. Okay, so this kind of different people from different backgrounds. Maybe these were somehow similar in other events. They're quite different, but find some kind of commonality. It's not explicitly futures oriented, but it fits very well for this kind of a more sensitive approach to futures. And so the idea is also then to play with different scales and spaces and surfaces and objects in those spaces, and that we can kind of make things a bit more seamless. But then we have scales all the time. If you think about climate change and scenarios, they can be also interacted with in different ways. So this is also something that's very easy. It might be easy for somebody to kind of place something along a scale. I did the same event with futurists as well, and in the end, the tables come together, and the fruit is eaten. Maybe a glass of wine can be added. Networking, practice, and collaboration is discussed, and the idea is kind of a seamless event, and people are not necessarily understanding where it's going, but they somehow like the experience, and it seems to go. So in this way, you can also think, how do you work differently in regions, and how do you utilize the future differently? I think these are the more current things. And so this is my pet project. Let me just stop sharing. And then I can move this a little bit. Yeah, maybe I zoom out a little bit. Are you still with me? Okay. This is a little bit harder to do online, but you can get the idea that there's different ways in which we can iterate, and we can also place, and we can play with objects, and we can think about how things work. We did one version of this in a kind of a little island from our department, and so I asked futurists, about so when you're dreaming, where are you? Are you in the past? Are you in the present? Or are you in the future? Or something else? And some were really bravely saying I'm definitely really, really far, 1,000 years into the future. It's always like a 1,000 years in the future. Or I'm kind of stuck a little bit in my childhood, maybe, and then we played so we played a little bit on these kind of benches and placed things here and there, and we made our own scales about how to engage those, and it's quite a nice way to open up and to get things started, and also to try to think differently. And of course, it's okay if it's just for fun. Some of these methods are fun, and I'm not actually saying that formal foresight methods can't be fun as well. But sometimes they are really painful. A Delphi study can be really hard to go through. It's really hard to make, and maybe hard to answer. So maybe sometimes this kind of a way of iterating and discussing and finding commonalities, or especially, we could think about there's been debate in our field about futures cone, and plausibility, for example, so how do you, the future should be like the preferred future should be made, and everybody should kind of go onto there, and we kind of focus on that. Or then we should be looking at all the alternatives, always just alternatives futures. Or then we shouldn't do alternative futures because that gives us only a few choices. So what's more than, so all of this is something. You understand my playful game here, but it's also to break this kind of automated approach that participants might have. And the idea then is to find to acknowledge those networks and those people in those events. That's why you come to them. It's kind of maybe an unsaid aspect of Foresight work. So I'm kind of curious what methods you might be pet projects that you have been developing. This has been with me for over 10 years, and I've been playing with it in different ways. It's slightly difficult to do it online, as you might imagine, but but I can think that digital tools could help with this, but also something very, very basic that you can do with just some fruit. So maybe we go to the breakout rooms now, and we could, if we would.
Yeah,
you could think about, yes, yeah.
Breakout rooms are ready.
Okay, and if you could discuss, now I'm just, how do you work differently? And maybe you could, if you have fruit at hand, that you could think of ways in which you could utilize the object to explain your future. This might be a little bit tricky approach. Yeah, how do you work differently in different regions, for example? It's something that we're kind of curious about also, and how could we work differently in the future?
Super. Amos, do you want to join a breakout group as well?
Yes, I can join as well.
And then we say for 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
How long? Yeah. Okay. I can open whenever you say.
Yeah, well, if you open now and try to consider how these very friendly objects can be kind of helpful for explaining futures or futures literacy, or what is your main interest. Yeah.
Super. Then I open now. And I think, Nick, we have to join manually. If one of us would go into room 2.
Between you and I?
Yeah.
I had to go get a fruit.
Maybe you can go in room 2. There's only Amos right now. Okay. Amos is alone. Oh God, I will move him into a different room.
Are you able to go into a room then, or is it impossible?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so
then
Amos left?
Yeah, no, maybe go into room 1.
Okay.
And I will go into room 5.
Okay, sounds nice. Okay, see you then, or see you later.
Yeah.
Anissa and
learn from? Is it in the university? Oh, maybe it's in the university. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's your networks or your friends, and so there's lots of little movements, experimentations with, especially around the avant-garde, that were really kind of testing what these mean, and they were on the border of art and life and seeking meaning and there's so but often it's been kind of they've been too ahead of their time, or the mainstream doesn't necessarily understand what to do with them. They're not necessarily for profit. So yeah, so I'm kind of familiar with that. I did an art residency in Bulgaria with the Soros Foundation, kind of following the Bulgarian avant-garde movement there.
Oh, really?
It was called the trans avant-garde, and they did, what was it called? It's basically self-colonizing was the approach that they had, which was basically they took the avant-garde from the West, and they decided that, well, in Bulgaria there hasn't been an art movement, so we kind of instigate it. We're behind. We need to kind of instigate it. And what that meant was that they were doing media art, basically. But they only had like one projector in the whole city, and so it was very conceptual, you know, that they were using whatever they had, you know, and they were making these conceptual pieces about how things could be different, or and often playing with the kind of traditional and then modern and yeah. So there's a kind of a rich area there that I think feeds into Futures work. So yes.
Does anyone have any comments or questions or anything you would like to add to the discussion?
Yeah, what do you talk about in your rooms? Did you find something to discuss?
Well, I'll jump in because I have to jump off the call in just a second because I have a meeting on the hour. That's something I have to get ready for. But I'll represent breakout room 4. We discussed food as both a metaphor, but something to consider the people's reaction to, and being sensitive to food disruption, war, food futures, changes in climate. Food can be both hopeful and catastrophic as we see our food systems changing and evolving in ways where the future does not look bright, and yet it's something we look forward to. There's eating as a celebration, but there's also hunger, and so sort of a complex, putting a few layers on kind of the nutritional value. But that was our group. Thank you very much, and nice seeing you all.
Thank you. That was good. Really interesting. I think, Alexis, we had the same kind of discussion about kind of doom and people having anxiety and how to facilitate that kind of conversation. Anybody else?
I can go. So I don't know exactly what we did, but I'm calling it sticky futures and reference to something else that I was doing. But we were talking about that the choice of fruit can be used. Wait, what was it? It was, the fruit can be like a timer. So you could tell futures that, for instance, a grape is a the time you take, yes, that's it. The time you take to eat a fruit is also very important, I guess, because then if you eat a grape, that kind of future is very capsule, concise, and it just lasts how long you take to eat a grape. But imagine a future that is a grapefruit and that takes a really long time. And also it splashes everywhere, including your fingers, and then maybe from there it goes on your clothes. And so it has this like stickiness to them, like the future lasts longer because it kind of shows up in little dots on a wall, or maybe on your fingers for a whole day, maybe in your clothes. And it's like a scale, kind of less sticky and more sticky futures.
Yeah,
Something
yeah,
like that.
I like that. Sticky futures, that's perfect. Yes, and of course, this is that we're using more of our senses. And one of my questions I have had is on what have you forgotten, and is it a smell, is it a taste? So so maybe that fits for your fits for your approach. Yeah, I like that. Ed also had mentioned that he had a wonderful mango, and we're talking about ripe because the mangoes we have here in Finland, they're shipped here and they arrive and they're hard as rocks, and when we wait for them to come ready, and then overnight and they're spoiled. So you have this time aspect with fruit. There are also seeds there. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, maybe shortly from our room, we had some really interesting discussions about metaphors through fruits. So we were, for example, talking about this orange here and how this orange might help us to explain how we work or how we collaborate in different cultures. And if I look at this from a Nordic European view, then it would be, oh, we're all in the same boat and one goal. And because I'm in Mexico right now, I think I would interpret this very differently, or not very, but depending on the situation. So how the same fruit can be seen from very different perspectives, depending on where you are, or how you cut a fruit, for example, what tools do you have, right? What knowledge you have, how the banana should be peeled from which side.
Yep.
So if we kind of put that into trend analysis or weak signal analysis, how do we analyze these trends? With which tools do we do that, depending on the country where we are, or the background knowledge that we have, and what do we then come up with based on this technique that we used? Yeah, so there are many different metaphors and analogies through food.
I love that. That is the word that I forgot to mention that I'm kind of interested in that you mentioned was tacit knowledge. So how do we and often exploring that tacit knowledge is very hidden. It's difficult to pry out, or maybe you just don't ask the right question. And I like the analogy that you have. Yeah.
I take off my president hat and just comment as another researcher. One of the things that's come to me about this during this whole demo hour is that these informal processes, like pet projects, informal approaches to futures, there's an explanatory aspect about why they would even work. Why are they even viable? And I think it's because people already have engagement with the future. Like it already exists. So it's like kind of throwing away the idea of like, if we could only get them to think of future more, then everything will be better, and kind of replace it with everybody is already engaging the future somehow. Let's find some useful ways to discuss that. Is maybe a better path forward, or more beneficial path forward. So that was something that kind of came to my mind about this topic, and it's kind of interesting to think about explanatory factors, like why does your fruit method even function at all? Like why? I mean, aside from the aesthetics and art-based explanation, it kind of points to the notion that there is pre-existing anticipation happening in the world. So, yep. Just a thought.
Yeah, anybody else? The one thing that we were talking with Ed was that, for example, that there's this divide between is Foresight and Futures a science or an art? And so then we are kind of, so if we have to be a science, then we have to have very officious, formal methods, you know, and then we have these kind of official methods, and they are tried and true, and they are tested, and they have the stamp, and they get the funding, or they get the acknowledgement. But then you've got this kind of crazy fruit method, and I pitched that maybe it's not having it might not hit the same mark, you know. It's like I don't know what it is yet, and until we get the right situation. But I know it has value, and so this kind of a artistic, creative experience. Can we kind of bring up the value of that as well? But it's kind of a fine line, you know, being acknowledged in our field. So maybe people have, I've heard of scenarios, I've heard of Delphi maybe, but the other things I'm not quite sure about, you know. And is that what you do? Yeah. The future stuff.
Amos, and maybe to connecting to, I feel like there's also a question within your comment that you just made. Because we talked obviously before this session, and you had these questions of, where could this method go next? How could we combine it with potentially other methods that are already there, or in which context could this be utilized? So all these questions you posed, and I think having now a group here of Foresight practitioners is interesting to maybe discuss these questions after we experienced it a bit. Also, we still have a few minutes, so maybe this is a discussion that we could move into, if anybody has some thoughts on it, some reflections, combining it to your own context. And yeah.
And maybe I would pose a question, if that's okay, just for everyone, because I have to kind of out myself for not being a futures practitioner. But I'm a designer, actually a UX designer. But I had some connections with futures through my master's degree, because we had methods around design futuring. I don't know if that's a term which you're familiar with. Yes. And I think that's maybe kind of the same direction which the discussion is going right now. How can we implement more creative and maybe qualitative methods to get futures or futures discussions to become more tangible, maybe. And I think that's where the collaboration between futures and design is very fruitful. And now that this topic has come up, I'm really interested in your opinions, how this collaboration is, or if you think that those kind of more qualitative approaches are needed, or if there's room for that in your everyday practice.
I think that this could be mixed with. Go ahead, but you can please go ahead. Yeah.
I'll make it a very quick point. Thank you. If I could just add to that, and also to go back to a point that you made, Amos, about how some people may trivialize the use of fruit within a more formal methodology and within Foresight and Futures. But just relating to the point and the comment that you just made, Lennart, something quite powerful that the use of fruit does, which is definitely needed, I mean, within Foresight, within Futures, but at the intersection with design as well, is reconfiguring and kind of re-emphasizing or recentering the transformation of or recentering the creation of transformative visions of the future from some structure out there, which is in a formal setting at some university or in a company or a consultancy or within government, taking it and taking it there and centering it within everyday life, and enabling people to kind of understand that the methods or the tools with which they can begin that process of imagination and reimagination doesn't have to begin out there. It can begin right here in the kind of situatedness of everyday life, using everyday items with things that you would encounter and use and feel and interact with on a daily basis. So I think that's quite a powerful function of using fruit. You know, you can just pick up really anything that's on your table in your kitchen or in your living room and use it for that purpose. And also just linking it to the design imperative. I suppose that's something which has kind of been forgotten or kind of lost as everything's become more bigger and more sophisticated and more connected and complex. The everyday has been lost within that discussion and within that process of imagination. So yeah, I don't know if that was I think it's just a comment back to your comment, Leonard, but also a comment on your fruit comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Really good points. And I think we could use more of the things that we have at hand, and that it is a kind of a design problem, and it's a framing problem maybe. So there's a project I'm a part of, and they're making, basically it's like kind of a climate theater for decision makers, where decision makers will come and from the city, and they will speculate on what they could do in different kind of crisis situations. But they don't call it you know, like a futures crisis theater. They call it a policy operations room, you know. And so you are invited now to a policy operations room, and you will make decisions on a, you know, and basically they're shown a kind of a speculative film, and then they engage it, and they look at the decisions that they have made recently and in their local government, and how would that play out in this situation where there's flooding or disaster. But so it's kind of this framing. So maybe I could do this same fruit workshop with the military personnel, but I would have ration packs or something like that, you know, or, you know, a survival pack. You know, build your own survival pack for the future that you're most scared about. You know, this kind of thing, and they would engage in it. You know that that's kind of like they would get to the. So this is I didn't say this, anything is written in my blurb there, but what we wanted to have a basic minimum product of is making meaningful conversations about futures. That's what we are supposed to do. So if that's not working, you know, if the post-its are in the way of having a meaningful conversation, then we have to ditch those, or we have to kind of subvert them. So it is a design problem, and I think that we can learn a lot from designers, creatives, whoever can communicate or play with the communication. Yeah.
Just to very quickly add to that point, I can imagine one of the kind of main challenges behind that, at least for us as Foresight people and for you and others, Leonard, in design, is kind of going through the process of de-weirding something that's novel or unfamiliar to people who perhaps haven't interacted with it before. And that example of a military in a kind of military, more formalized context, like demonstrates that very, very well. But yeah, as you mentioned, language, framing, story, artifacts, very powerful ways to do that.
Right, and I really like the fact that it was that you're using fruit, Amos, and I know that it's for that kind of personal and slightly ridiculous. You know, you can't take yourself too seriously when you're holding a banana, or you know, or I don't know, an apple, or half an orange. And I was thinking that it's just in those scientific or more cerebral types of spaces where we've come very compartmentalized ways of approaching things that these methods might be useful, because it enables participants to be bodies and to be ridiculous and to be, you know, more than just heads. And enables different types of conversations between people rather than maybe just institutional roles. once you soften those boundaries, maybe different types of conversations can happen as well that are more transformational rather than strategic. What do we need to change about ourselves rather than how we can change things without changing ourselves.
Very good points.
We also have a comment from Alexis, I think. Ah, yeah, you're still here. I think very beautiful to start using different methods besides words, right? Finding new communication ways, and food could be one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again, it was also the point to engage shy people. Also with children and students, I have been teaching, and the sure way to get to people to open up is to talk about, well, what food do you like? What food do you hate? What food will you definitely not want to eat tomorrow if we play? So food has a kind of an instinct that people have an opinion about it, and at least then it's a way to kind of open up.
I had the
space. I have a question for the group.
You go.
Oh, sorry, I interrupted someone, I think.
Go, Jess.
I have a question for the group. So, which fruit do you think is like a villain? Kind of a villainy fruit. What does the group say?
The fruit that
you're thinking
surprises
too much. Set it out.
Dragon fruit. Raisins are definitely villains.
Oh, that's cool.
Raisins.
That's an intimidating one.
Yeah.
Wait, tomatoes. Wait, explain. Explain now what.
Because tomatoes are always misidentified as vegetables, so they're like a villain. They always surprising everybody that they're fruits, and
they're like the wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah. Also, I was just reading something recently that composting tomatoes is risky because they can spread diseases faster. So they, but I don't know if this was a credible source or not, so I shouldn't be spreading it.
They grow, but yeah, they
wow.
Also,
wait, Alexis said raisins.
They squirt, you bite into a tomato. Yeah. Plums. Yeah.
You ever bite into a plum that you thought was stoned?
Yeah.
And it still has the stone?
Yeah.
I have chipped teeth to prove.
Wow.
That plums are
long-lasting evilness.
Yes.
Totally.
The evil is hidden inside.
Cashew.
I said raisins.
Cashews are fruit? Sorry, Alexis, raisins.
I said raisins because I don't like them, and they're always they look like chocolate chips in a cookie, and then I get a mouthful of raisins.
Yes, it's the sneaky fruit.
Yeah.
The sneaky chocolate chip, basically.
During the pandemic, I was also collecting all the seeds from the different fruit that I had. I somehow realized that you can grow from tomatoes and grow, and then I started growing everything, avocado, anything on my balcony, just to see what. Apple tree did really well, even survived the winter here in Finland, but realized that it's going to get really, really too big. So
oh, nice.
Okay.
Any other observations? But I'm happy that you see the potential. But also it can be any inanimate objects that you have at hand, and the right context, and especially in a time of kind of high tech foresight. Let's not forget these really very simple things. We get the right people in the together and share something, and you can use what you have at hand. I'm curious also about this kind of some of these kind of a GPS kind of tracking technology that I could do some work where, for example, you would have a stand of food in a busy city, and people could, you know, pick the food that they want, depending on what party they wanted to, you know, vote for, or what issue they wanted to, you know, these kind of things. I think there's like potential for a little bit technology to kind of be involved there somehow.
Maybe we for sure, Amos, should share your contact details. If anybody wants to bear with you afterwards. But I think the way that you just summarized and brought attention to the physical world again in these times of technological advancements was a really nice summary of our experiences with fruit today while being on a Zoom meeting together. And I think if there are no further questions, comments, feel free to still put comments in the chat, but I think we can slowly close. Feeling the vibe? Yes. And so we have your, Amos, your contact details in the chat now. LinkedIn, you're also there to find. And then I think I just want to say a big thank you to you for sharing your approach, this very creative approach, bringing a bit more colorfulness into the Foresight world, letting us play with it. It was great to collaborate with the JFS network today for the first time, doing this in a collaboration with another community. Yes, and we also have your contacts in the chat, and then you find a Google Doc link. So as I said at the beginning, these demo hours are happening monthly. So if you want to share your unique approach, something that you would like to get feedback on or just spread the word about, then feel free to sign up in this document, and we have some slots still available this year. But yeah, with that, I think we will close.
Thank you very much for everybody attending. That was very nice.
Thank you. We will stop the recording and make it available for everyone afterwards.